Justin Trudeau ends 2023 with a bang.
He finally answers all the questions Canadians have wondered about. In this interview, Justin honestly describes himself better than anyone could. His answers clearly provide a picture of his persona.
Prime Minister, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
It's always a pleasure, Mercedes.
It is Christmas time, and it's a tough time for a lot of people this time of year, and I imagine maybe a bit of a tough time for you. You've had a tough year, politically, personally. How are you doing?
But that's the question we're always asking each other. Right now, times are tough for everyone, and that's why really we see the best of Canadians coming forward at this moment as people continue to roll up their sleeves and lean in for each other, even while everything is challenging. And yeah, I think this is a moment at the holidays when everyone's going to be pulling together and reflecting on hopefully a much better year in 2024.
Your polls would indicate that you're not heading for a better year. 7 out of 10 Canadians want you to step down. There was a recent poll saying that Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney were both more popular choices than you to lead the Liberal Party. Why do you think Canadians are so frustrated with you? Well,
I think, first of all, it's a really frustrating time. Full stop. There's so much going on around the world. There's so much impacting us here at home. There's so many challenges people are facing in their daily lives, from groceries to rent, that yeah, there's a lot of frustration. But we have been working incredibly hard to deliver for Canadians. Not the time to be slowing down or to stop fighting for people. We have been focused on delivering for Canadians for 8 years now, and the context we're in right now, where progress has become so fragile because of global and large macro events, is the time to be doubling down and rolling up our sleeves, and that's what I'm here for.
And I understand wanting to advance that agenda, and that it's hard to let go of being in power once you're in, but historically Canadian prime ministers don't get elected 4 times in a row, and people are being very clear that they don't like you in these polls.
Listen, people are frustrated right now, but on a personal level, I made a commitment in 2015 to a whole bunch of young people who came out to vote for the very, very first time.
Sunny ways, my friends, sunny ways. This is what positive politics can do.
On the environment, on inclusion, on gender equality, on growing the economy, on reconciliation. Those young people, 8 years later, are having trouble paying their rent, worried about their future in ways that are just as tangible, if not more, because of the global context we're in. And I didn't make a promise that I was going to make things better for them and then walk away after 4 years or even after 8 years. I said I'd be there to fight for them every single day.
Even if they don't want you there.
Listen, there'll be an election eventually in which people get to make that choice. But I am not giving up on them. I'm not giving up on Canada. I'm not giving up on the progressive vision of progress that we've been fighting for every single day over the past years.
Let's talk about housing, because it's something that affects everyone. And there's been a lot of struggle in every Canadian city, every Canadian province, to try to find affordable housing. One of the issues which your government has recognized is that there's more people than there is housing necessary. There's, I believe, a need for 3.5 million homes by the end of the decade. You've promised 30,000. It's only 1% of the supply. Why so low?
On the contrary, we've actually made commitments that are adding up to about 300,000 new units over the coming decade. These are the kinds of things we need to accelerate, and there's no one way of doing it. What we've come at is not a single silver bullet, but a massive range of of initiatives, whether it's the First Home Savings Account that 300,000 people have used to start being able to save up for a down payment, whether it's the Rapid Housing Initiative that has quickly got things up and running across the country, whether it's the Housing Accelerator that is securing deals with cities that are transforming their zoning, transforming densification, so they're building more places near public transit to create more livable cities and communities, and those things are starting to land, and they will just accelerate over the coming years.
On housing, one of the big issues has been whether there is enough for those who are being welcomed into Canada. In the most recent survey we saw, more people came into Canada in the last quarter than since 1957. And yet your government is also acknowledging that there's not enough housing. Do you think that you bear some responsibility for the housing crisis based on your policies?
Oh, we absolutely have to be part of solving for this, but let's be clear about the numbers we're seeing. Only about a quarter of those numbers are the federal permanent resident immigration numbers. 3/4 of those numbers are actually in three categories: asylum seekers who are arriving irregularly, international students, where there's been an amazing spike in that, a concerning spike in that, and temporary foreign workers as well that are needed for growing our economy, for working in our businesses. And on all three of those, we have specific plans on it. We're working with international partners on the asylum seekers. We're making sure that institutions across the country, as they get accredited by the provinces, are both legitimate institutions, because we've seen some fraud and some sketchy practices there, but are also able to house the international students that are coming, so we're not putting pressures on the communities. And around temporary workers, making sure that employees and employers have a role in ensuring housing. If they absolutely need to bring in foreign workers, they have to make sure that there's going to be housing for them as well.
I just want to go back to immigration, though, because that is a federal responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And you were clearly articulating when I looked at the interviews from you last year that you knew housing was a problem, yet it took until the last month or so for you to act. So I go back to the question of, do you bear some responsibility here?
Well, of course, we all bear responsibility. This is a challenge that we have to work on all together. But from 2017 onwards, we put forward a national housing strategy that has been making sure and securing more homes on people. The spike in temporary arrivals over the past 2 years, a total upwards of 2 million people, need to be responded to, and that's why there are very specific challenges that we are addressing in partnership with municipalities and provinces, but also with international partners to make sure that we're managing that flow right. We need to continue to protect immigration. We need continued immigration in this country, but we have to protect the integrity of our system, and that's very much what we're working on.
Up next, what the Prime Minister says about Iran, China, and India. And I ask him about his track record on defense spending.
We are continuing to invest in our front lines, in our equipment for our military, as people expect us to, but we're doing it in a responsible way.
I want to move on to foreign and defense policy, something that really has played a significant role in domestic politics this year, perhaps more so than usual, with all the crisis that the Canadian Armed Forces have been called on to help with. You say a Canadian citizen murdered on our soil by a foreign government, concern about Iranian senior regime officials intimidating Canadians, concerns about China intimidating the diaspora population here as well. When you look at the national security picture for the country, what do you see?
I see an incredibly complex world in which Canada, being a country of laws, a country of defense of the international rules-based order, has a more important role to play than many other countries around the world. If you look over the past number of years, whether it's been with China and the two Michaels, whether it was the challenges we had with Saudi Arabia, whether it's the challenges we have right now with India, whether it's ongoing challenges with Iran around PS752 and foreign interference on the ground, continued challenges with Russia and their violation of the UN Charter and the international rules-based order in engaging in invading Ukraine. Every step of the way, Canada has doubled down on our values and on the rules-based order. We have shown that we stand up for what is right and what is our system of justice. And we have stayed strong at a time where bigger countries and countries that play by different rules have tried really hard to impact us, and we're continuing to defend ourselves in all the right ways.
Do you think that part of the reason why some of those bigger countries or our allies aren't listening is our lack of investment in foreign policy and defense?
Canada has continued to step up as a member of NATO, as an international partner, whether with our Indo-Pacific strategy or things like investing in vaccine facilities in South Africa, or being part of significant investments across Eastern Europe in nuclear plants and things like that. Canada is a very engaged international partner, and countries around the world continue to look to us as one of those countries that's always going to stand up and defend the rules.
That's not what I hear from our allies. They point to us having 3 days worth of ammunition if a war to break out, to not having tanks that function, and those that are overseas in Latvia, and the government has not made efforts to replace them. They point to $1 billion coming in defense cuts. They point to you allegedly, privately saying that we'll never hit 2% of GDP.
Okay, well, those examples are all specifically on defense. What I'm talking about is the large international frame. But even on defense, we have since 2017 stepped up with about 70% increases on our defense spending. We're going to continue to do more and more in defense. We just announced a $38 billion NORAD modernization. We're stepping up with F-35s. Yes, we've had to make up for lost time when under the Conservative government, defense spending dipped below 1% for the only time.
But you've been in power for 8 years. You said you'd never buy the F-35s, which was part of the delay there, and your own chief of the defense staff is saying that if there were to be a war tomorrow, Canada would be in big trouble. Yeah. Isn't that on you after 8 years in power?
Everyone is in big trouble because we have been shipping, all of us as allies, as NATO allies, shipping massive amounts of ammunition to Ukraine right now because Ukraine is on the front line of defending not just their own territory, but their international rules-based order. And that's why we are so unequivocal on Ukraine. And quite frankly, even yes, as we're fixing those procurement challenges to make sure we are getting more ammunition for Canada, for training, continuing to be there for Ukraine despite the hesitations by the Conservative Party is the best way to protect our future as a country and our system of democracy.
But Canadian soldiers are looking at this and saying we can't protect our country right now.
Right. We are continuing to do that. We are continuing to invest in our front lines, in our equipment for our military, as people expect us to, but we're doing it in a responsible way.